Hello little munchkins, welcome back to my channel. My name is Janet. We are at part 2 of the Quicksilver recap now. If you haven't watched part 1, please go back and watch it. I will put the link below for you to watch part 1 of the book because we're about halfway through and we are going to now continue with the story until we come to its epic ending. So they go to the warland. There are 20,000 tents set up at this war camp. Obviously, they have been here for a really long time because they have set up even permanent structures such as 2-story buildings and even a tavern for entertainment and drinks, I suspect. Far away in the distance, there is a ribbon of frozen water which separates the war camp from who knows what on the other side. But it looks like a blackened wasteland. But you can tell that there was a fortress there. By who? Don't know. You'll find out, but it's creepy. This is Amathria, or in a language easier pronounced, it's Hell's Teeth, the seat of the enemy. The reason why it was called that because that gloomy fortress was built from the bones of demons on that other side. How inviting for the neighbors, right? Suddenly a tall creature with tree bark and vines wrapped around his limbs appear from the tavern. Good morning, Lord. The lodging you requested have already been prepared. Fisher, just Fisher is fine. You get the sneaking suspicion that Fisher doesn't want to be the leader of this war, or feels not worthy maybe to lead their warriors. In fact, he doesn't even want to go see them and address them. Instead, he sends Ren to go talk to the troops. Sierras and Carrion start training with Ren. Even though both of them do know how to fight back in the human realm, they don't seem to be cutting it against, though, the Fey warriors and their speed. Carrion goes first. He continues to be knocked down by Ren on his hiney, falling all over the place. My ass, can't take much of this. I bet that's the first time you said those words, Sirius calls out from its sitting spot. Might as well kick a man while he's down, right? Especially one as cocky as Carrion. It's a good time to take a stab at him. I'm more of a giver than a taker, actually. At least he's quick at his comebacks. Up to this point, all the characters have been really serious, especially Fisher. Unfortunately, he's not a man with much humour. Dirty mouth, yes, but that doesn't bring the laughs to the reader, which is why I was grateful for the arrival of Carrion and his sassiness. Sirius was next to train with Ren, and like a real sneaky minx, she tries to strike him while his back's turned to her, but he was too quick and blocked the strike, because a true warrior never really takes his guard down. Although Sirius is not going to be able to beat Ren, she was at least doing better than Carrion, and Kingfisher notices and secretly is a little bit impressed. Summons Sirius to his tent, which is enchanted, again, much like Harry Potter, where the interior was 10 times bigger than the exterior of the tent. So big, in fact, that it had a huge king-size bed inside. I mean, what's that for, huh? There is a tall bookshelf and a stack of books that Fisher's using to do some secret research on. What's so important that Sirius needs to go to the tent? Well, it turns out he wanted to have another meal with the girl. Is this guy a foodie or what? Or does he just doesn't like to eat alone anymore? Let's eat and try not to draw blood this time, shall we? Please? Wow, someone has suddenly developed some manners. Even though the meal starts off cordial, it never seems to stay this way with these two. And soon Fisher and Sirius are fighting about why he has to control her all the time with a blood oath to command her, rather than just letting her have her autonomy. Which is fair. Give her a choice. I want to help you, Fisher. I'll do it gladly. Suddenly, black shadows spill out of Fisher's fingers and flips the table with the meal over, and Sierra's was pushed against the bookcase, and then Kingfisher's mouth is crashing onto Sierra's lips. This is kiss number 2. Then they're making out again, and they're getting into it, and it's getting lusty. Sierra shouts out, I want you, which you think is something the man wants to hear. She's basically consenting to you. But instead of Kingfisher's getting all woo about it, he suddenly stops and moves to the other side of the tent, like someone's just bench slapped him across the face and he's come to his senses. But that didn't last long because he pauses, then he's back again, macking on her lips, and she can feel Kingfisher's heart racing now. I can't trust anything, he says, and lets her go again and leaves the tent. This man needs to control his emotions. What a roller coaster of behavior. But I get it. The author's trying to build up tension here where you're going to give some smut to the dear readers, but not all of it just yet. Sierra's then bolts out of the tent too and runs across the camp like a dazed puppy. Luckily, she runs into Ren, who automatically could tell something happened because he can smell Kingfisher on her. These fays and their noses. If Sierra's gets turned on, everyone or every fae will know, and there's no hiding any secrets here. Not sure if this is a superpower that anyone needs to know when someone is aroused, but anyway, that's what they've got. Back to the story, Sierra follows Ren into the war tent where there is a gathering of captains. Again, the tent is huge. Awaiting in there are about 20 warriors waiting for Ren, plus Carrion, who is sitting by the fire eating a fat slice of cake. Good on him. My type of guy is, this is why he grows on me. A man who finds cake during war is someone I want to keep around and be around. Go and sit with Swift. The heat will burn off the, I assume, the pheromones, the lustful smell of Fisher. But it turns out it's not cake that Carrion is eating, but a delicious quiche. Generously though, he shares it with Sierra. While they're eating, Carrion gossips about his observation. Lovely. He points to a female warrior sitting in the center of the room, who is talking animatedly with 3 males. Of course, she's fae and therefore beautiful, because what fae isn't? She has white blonde hair and vivid lilac eyes. Before Sierra arrived in the tent, the female warrior had already punched one of the other warriors with long black war braids, and that warrior had a wolf head stamped onto his leather chest protector. Why is your neck bleeding? Carrion asked Sierra. Turns out that during the makeout session, Fisher gave Sierra a Fae-type hickey, which draws blood. I guess he does have sharp teeth. Luckily, this looks like more of a scratch than a hickey. Otherwise, that would be a little bit embarrassing, right? Fisher finally enters the tent and his eyes go straight to Sierra, who is looking all dopey and sharing a quiche with Carrion, but his expression is unreadable at this point. The Fae warrior, who we find out her name is Danya, is not happy with a lot of the Faes, including Kingfisher. Let's hear it. Let's hear the amazing, foxing reason why you left us high and dry for the past century years, and why you've decided to slink back to us now with your tail between your legs. Carrion's eyes lifts to Sierra like a true gossiper, probably suppressing the "ooh, no she didn't" sort of vibe. Remember how they all talked about the battle at Galithrian? Well, apparently that entire city of Valerian families burned to death due to this evil character named Malcolm. And at that point, that's when Kingfisher just disappeared, which is why Danya is pissed at the abandonment. Danya threatens to put her sword through Fisher's throat, at which point the man she punched earlier, whose name is Lorith, stands up to stop her. Not that I think Fisher needs the protection, but it's a nice gesture. There seems to be a good reason why actually Fisher disappeared, but he can't seem to tell them. But what's with all the secret? Doesn't he know that the truth will just set you free? Or at least it would chill Danya out. Danya is crying and suddenly she lifts her sword to strike at Fisher. Stop! Sierra yells out. Danya gets slammed into a table, but what really was shocking is that her sword splintered into 1,000 shards of silver like sharp little knives and hitting the wall and getting stuck in there. Everyone is now turning and staring at Sierra, shocked. Except Fisher, because he's, a chilled cucumber. We have a faxing alchemist, Danya says. She's mine, Fisher being all territorial again, which apparently is meant to be hot, but I'm not here for that. Before anything else could happen, there is a boom outside. Icebreakers, 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 you hear all this yelling. All hell breaks loose. Apparently the enemy has shown up at the river bank of the ice. Those people on the other side. They must now break the ice so that the dead cannot cross it from the Dark Fortress onto their camps. Carrion is all about the action. Although he's smaller than all of the other warriors, he wants to go out and break some ice as well. So Sierra follows along rather than hiding in the tent because we know this girl is better than that. Once you get there, you see these huge warriors, about the twice of the size of Fisher, standing at the edge of the frozen lake with gigantic sledgehammers pounding on the ice, hoping to break it. But the surface is holding because it's quite thick ice. On the other side, you see a dark mass gathering on the edge. 50,000 vampires. Not only did this world have fays, they now also have vampires or fays who were not cured of the blood disease. And now they're known as vampires. And you can see that some of these vampires are now already halfway across the ice, making their way to them. Blue white orbs fell through the sky and come into the ice, crashing, creating holes in them. Little by little, the ice is beginning to break, luckily, and you hear cracks and spiderwebs coming through. Of fires also being shot out onto the vampires who are climbing along the ice. Unfortunately, though, the fire does not seem to be stopping them, and they're still moving, but just on fire. Very zombie-like vampires that can't be killed by fire. And they are just moving closer and closer. Fisher's magic comes sweeping across the ice in a black smoke and pushes the vampires into the freezing water, and the water then just dragging them down. Good evening, Kingfisher. I'm so glad you decided to come out and play. Won't you say hello? It's the character Malcolm. Malcolm is the king of vampires. Tall and slender, dressed in black, of course, because what vampire isn't? White straight hair hanging past his shoulders. Handsome, of course, with blood red eyes. Don't know how handsome that is, but apparently handsome. It's only been a couple of weeks since we last spoke. What can I say? I miss you. Is this giving you kind of old man vibes, sort of man kink, or what? That Kingfisher is working with Malcolm, because why the hell have they spoken recently? I'll be seeing you very soon. And then he was gone, along with the remaining vampires. After the ice-breaking incident, Fisher finds Sierra's and gets all jelly about her sharing food with Carrion. Why? She asks, all clueless. Girlie, you know why. Do we need to have a chat about making him jealous? Sierra's, though, is all panicked about Malcolm and the massive vampires, which is fair. I would be too. But Fisher doesn't seem to be fazed. Apparently, it's a regular occurrence of this war zone. Malcolm likes to make his presence known once in a while. And basically, from time to time, he will send a fleet of his vampires so he can flex. But Sierra wants answers. She wants the tea on Malcolm. So let's go into it. Malcolm is a high fae vampire. The very first when they were first cursed. When the cure was found, most of the faes drank the antidote, but not Malcolm, because he enjoyed the dark magic that he gained from being a vampire and staying this way. And of course, he liked that he was immortal. Like I said, fays here are not immortal. They do live for ages, but eventually they will age and die, and Malcolm didn't want any of that. But Malcolm is vain. He wants to stay forever young, and now he's the strongest vampire because he's lived for so long. He's strong enough to bite someone, actually turn them into vampires, but not feeders, so not mindless creatures, because they get to be conscious and keep their character traits. When other vampires, who he has princes, bite someone, they die and return without a soul. They're mindless zombies where they're just bloodthirsty and have to obey the masters and do exactly what they say. The majority of Malcolm's army are humans because they're easy to capture and turn, I suspect. You were with him, weren't you? Sierra says. For all those years we were missing. Oh, he's like, nah, I can't tell you that. His secretive nature is getting annoying at this point, but a twitch in his eyes seems to tell Sierra that he really actually can't say. Like he wasn't in control of this story because he's bound to something. He literally cannot tell anyone where he was. Sierra is now starting to understand this broody man. Girlie is getting the feels and she gets bold. I know that you want me, she says boldly. Go for it, girl. You get bold. You do you. I can want to fork you and still hate you, little Oshie. I mean, don't even, Fisher. No one's buying it. Even little clueless Sierras know that's not the truth. But like a caveman, he grips Sierras by the throat and growls at her like all fae like to do in every romantasy because it's hot apparently. And tries to get it off him, but it doesn't work. She's got the feels. It's over, Fisher. I'm telling you to fork me, Fisher. There it is. Consent. Here is the smut. This is the chapter where it's called literally the itch after all. And they do it. It's spicy. Kingfisher's dirty mouth is off the charts and he doesn't disappoint. So again, I'm not going to go into it. If you want to read some smut, this is a good opportunity to go get the book, find the chapter says the itch, and you go from there. But something weird does happen that I'm going to mention during their spicy scene. As they're doing it, the tattoos from Fisher's body flows and actually moves its way over to Sierra's body. A delicate little bird tattoo appears on her right forearm and other appears elsewhere on her body. The next day, Sierras confronts Fisher about the new tattoos, but apparently nothing to worry about. They probably will fade over time. She's like, take it back. But of course, it doesn't work that way. He's about to take Sierras to the healers so that she can take a tonic as contraception. But it turns out Sierras can't have children anyway. She was cleansed at 14. Madra does it to 70% of the girls at the ward as population control and sterilizes them. Fisher again is blank-faced with this news and seems to hear something in the distance and leaves Sierras to go to the forge by herself. Because there seems to be a forge in every location you go to. So even at this war zone, there is a forge, and she goes there. The forge, though, in this place is 30 minutes up a hill. By the time Sierras gets there, she's sweaty and annoyed. And Carrion is already there waiting for her, reading a book, sitting by a fire. This guy, I'm telling you, knows how to enjoy himself. Sierras is surprised that Carrion is so chilled about everything, learning about this new world and about the existence of Fae. But in actual fact, Carrion already knows about them. His grandmother told him about them ages ago. This girl is the only girl not in the know here. Carrion even had a book with pictures called Fae Creatures of the Galarian Mountains. How curious that he has a book when Madra had them all burnt so that people couldn't learn about this other realm and Faes and the magical world. Anyway, Carrion wasn't at the forge to annoy Sierras. Kingfisher had passed the small amount of Quicksilver he had in a box to Carrion to pass over to her once she was at the forge. But since he's here, he's going to help Sierras run more experiments rather than her now doing it on her lonesome, which is nice for a bit of company. 3 more experiments and still nothing. But there is no more time to do more experiments on that day because Fisher needs Sierras' help with something else. Remember how Sierras shattered Daniel's sword the other day and turned it into tiny needles now that was sticking in a big wall? Well, it turns out the sword was special, like Nemelia, Fisher's sword, which means it has Quicksilver in it, which kind of makes sense, which is why Sierras could command it and break it into shattered pieces. Turns out back in Valerian, a lot of the metal had a bit of Quicksilver in them, especially in the human realm, which is why I think Madra was confiscating all the metals from the land in case there was Quicksilver in those elements. So no one could get their hands on it and activate it and create magic in that realm, I believe. So most alchemists, you find out, could command metal if it had at least 5% Quicksilver in it. And they could make Quicksilver go from liquid to solid, but never into fragments like Sierras did to the sword, which makes her the most powerful alchemist ever recorded. Well, you go, girlie. This is why you're special. However, the poor girl hasn't even worked out how to control the Quicksilver. The only time she has ever done anything was in a panic or with a load of emotional sort of power behind it, and so it was not controllable. Daniel doesn't even understand why everyone is putting so much hope in this human who doesn't even know how to wield her power at this point. But Fisher tells the group that this human is their only choice because Bellicone is no longer sending them food or supplies for the troops. Their numbers in their soldiers are declining each time with Malcolm's attacks. So take it or leave it, they probably only have another 12 months tops before their front line are destroyed by Malcolm and he wins. Well, this is a lot of pressure to put on one human being. No surprise, Sierras is feeling a little bit overwhelmed and lightheaded after hearing this. They're forked at this point in her point of view. But Fisher's not there to offer her any sort of encouragement. In fact, he's back to Kalish to visit the healer Tialina. He's been visiting her a lot recently, which makes Sierras feel a little bit of jealousy that way. Are they together or something? I mean, the healer is beautiful after all. Then another FMC in a book where she doesn't know how stunning she is herself. With all these overwhelming feelings Sierras is getting, she solves it by turning to alcohol, of course. Loreth takes her to the tavern to find a drink. After 5 pours of potent whiskey, Sierras is feeling the buzz. And what happens when you get drunk? You stop filtering your words. He's a foxing liar. He's been lying to me this whole time, she tells Loreth. Who? Fisher? Impossible. He is an oath-bound Fae, and we can't lie. Apparently when Fae turns 21, they kneel before the Finrith stone, or some special stone, and make their decision to bleed on the stone and promise to never lie and be bond to the word. Or they can choose a lawless path where they can lie and cheat, but it comes with a price they are not willing to pay. And what does this cost, you ask? something stupid, their honor. I did an eye roll at this point, of course. Make it something tangible. What did you ever think he lied about? Laura asked. Kingfisher did say he had a large eggplant, and now she knows he was telling the truth from the last chapter, so he wasn't lying there. But Sierra's waves Laura's off. That's not important. What she's mad about is that Kingfisher didn't tell her how bad the situation was at the war camp, how important it was that she worked out how to control this Quicksilver to make weapons for them and relics for them before they all got killed by Malcolm. He thought she just had to make the relics and then he was going to let her go. Laura says, well, no, if that was the deal that he made with you, he will honor it and will not make you stay any longer and force you to make weapons too. Sierra is over this serious chat and she wants to chat about something else now. So she starts to ask him about their teeth and if they drink blood. Laura is a little bit taken back by the question because drinking blood is a very taboo conversation and definitely not one to be had in this open space in a tavern. It turns out they don't need to drink blood obviously for survival, but it's now a kink thing done in the bedroom by some fays and their mates. If a male drinks from their partner, it makes their eggplant harder than ever and makes the other person euphoric. You know where this is leading to, right, people? The conversation is getting a little bit awkward. Sierra moves on to a more polite subject, which is Laura's origin story. How did he end up in the middle of this war? This lethal warrior actually used to be a traveling singer, not a great one, and he met Fisher on the road one day when he was actually lying in a ditch, dying. 2 vampires had appeared and attacked him and left him for dead. If he had died, he would have turned and come back as a feeder. Kingfisher, though, rescued him, carried him back to Kalish, and let his healers do their thing. But it was looking bleak because there was a lot of the poison from the vampires in him when they drink your blood. So Fisher did save him by giving him a part of his soul and basically making him his brother. It's an ancient ritual that Kingfisher learned from his father in case he ever needed to save someone's life of someone that was important to him. But because he's such a lovely soul, he did it for a complete stranger. What a swell guy, right? You see what the author is doing here. They're trying to make you fall in love with Fisher, and slowly, your opinion of him is starting to turn. After Loreth was given this second chance of life, he trained up and got tanked and decided to stay and fight. Since he has no other family, so he might as well stay and do something good for the world. Here's the thing though with breaking off pieces of your soul and binding it with another fae. If that fae goes first, the soul comes back to the original owner and all is fine. But the soul giver, they were to go first and then the other person is still alive. They are waiting in limbo land before they can move on and they're trapped to sort of live as a ghost, like wandering around, waiting, not being able to participate in life but just watching it. Quite boring if you ask me. Well, Loreth is pretty sure he will go first, but if Kingfisher ends up going before him, he will actually just go and join his brother and sort of, take his own life. Kingfisher comes and picks up the drunken Sierras and transfer her back to Kalish to sleep off her buzz and deal with her hangover the next day. Eventually, he comes back for her and takes her to a new place called Ballad, a small village that he used to visit when he was a little child. That night, they were celebrating the longest night of the year. The reason for the visit, though, wasn't for the celebration. He needed something from Ballad. Imagine a cozy outdoor carnival with food stores, stands selling flowers and booths with games. That was what Ballad looked like. But instead of a crowd of humans, there were high fays, lesser fays, little creatures, tiny pixies, and even nymphs, all coexisting and having a great time here. Probably because food and drink were free and forever flowing. In this place that seems so cozy and safe, Sierras and Kingfisher get into some deep and meaningful conversations. But of course, nothing to move the story along, but purely to deepen their relationship at this point. But their D&M is suddenly interrupted by an older lady who immediately hugs Kingfisher. Her name is Wendy from Peter Pan. No, a different Wendy. She quickly shoves Kingfisher away though after the hug. I've been baking these cursed biscuits for you every year and you haven't once bothered to show up and eat them. No one else likes them, you cheeky ship. What a waste of ingredients. You owe me money. Do you know how expensive sugar are these days? Fisher, for the first time in this book, gives a genuine hearty laugh, which almost brings tears to Sierra's eyes. Keep it together, lady. Too soon to get emotional about this. Wendy looks to Sierra and could tell she was a girl for Zilverian. She says she felt her pass through because there was a buzz in the air that day. Sierras and Kingfisher enjoy the evening, drinking ale and stuffing themselves with stew that Wendy supplies them. And again, things are pretty relaxed until suddenly Sierra's hears the chant again. Unereth more, louder and louder. Sierra's grips the table she's been sitting at and gets dizzy. It must be all the drinking and the long day, Fisher tells Wendy, and they excuse themselves and leave from the festival. Why did you say those words before? Kingfisher asked Sierra's. Sierra's though didn't know she was chanting them out loud. She thought for some reason it was just in her head. She starts to repeat the words again, but Fisher tells her, stop. For him, those words are a little bit triggering. What do they mean? It's better you don't know. I can't tell you anyway. Fisher pulls Sierra's along to apartment, but not before they pass a statue which is of his late mother. Clearly his family was known here and important to the people. There are 2 bedrooms in the apartment, so these 2 lovebirds end up sleeping in separate rooms that night. Sorry, munchkins, no schmutt right now, not here. Sierra, though, wakes up to screaming in the other room. It's Fisher. So she dashes over there. Fisher is lying on his bed, shivering and sweating, eyes wide open and staring up at the ceiling. It was like he was having some sort of seizure or some internal struggle. It must have been the Quicksilver in his eye and in his body. But he tells Sierra to go. It will pass in an hour or 2. Obviously, this girl is not like dead inside. She's not going to be going, so she stays with him. And again, it's an opportunity for the book to further deepen their connections for the reader. A heartfelt moment between the 2. No different from other fantasy romance books I've read, but I understand why it's here to create this moment. Sierra can hear the chanting again, but she knows now it's actually from the Quicksilver in his body. The whole ordeal lasts for 4 hours, and to distract him from his seizure and pain, Sierra starts to reveal to Fisher more about her life. When she was 2, her father passed away, whilst her mother was still pregnant with Hayden. Her mother unfortunately had to become a prostitute to basically support her family. Her clients was mostly Madra's guardians, because obviously they're the ones with the means or resources who had the money to pay. She worked at the house of Callie, as there were at least security there and kept her safe, but she sometimes will also take clients at home. Her father figure, Elroy, who she worked for, was always in love with her mother and was around the house helping fix things and take care of her when her mother was unfortunately beaten by her clients. Her mother obviously did not want Sirius following in her footsteps and set up the apprentice with Elroy when she was just 10 years old. Her mother, though, throughout the years was starting a small rebellion, sneaking in metal to Elroy to make into weapons, like small knives, and handing them out to her friends at Callie to protect themselves. But then it got bigger, with her bringing in swords and shields to their house, which was dangerous, really. This is the time when the mum started introducing these men to Sirius, not in a seedy way, but more like in Terminator 2, where John Connor's mum will introduce him to the men she was dating to train him up. So in the future, he has life skills and fighting skills. Sierra's mum was the same. So this is how she learned how to steal. This is how she learned how to fight. And also tunnels that was existing in order to sneak to Madra's water reserves to steal water and food. All very useful skills to have in Ziverian. Over time, though, things got a bit worse. Sierra's mother got angry, sick of being mistreated by these guards and refusing them as clients. Then one morning, 6 years ago, Sierra's mother left the house and was stopped by a guardian who was doing random searches on people and found, unfortunately, 2 knives on her. And as punishment for carrying the weapons in the third, it was death. Sierra unfortunately saw the guard slit her mother's throat right in the middle of the street. After that, she found her house was quarantined due to the plague, and her and Hayden was left homeless. They couldn't stay with Elroy, as the guards might have worked out the knives were made by him and he would have been killed as well. So they found random places to sleep in and managed that way from that point onwards. My mother was killed too. We have that in common, little Osha. And then Kingfisher pulled Sierra into his arms and fell asleep. So as we said earlier, Kingfisher's mum died of complications after the birth of Lainey. But it turns out it wasn't because complications. Apparently she was murdered, and I suspect Bellicone is the person that did it. So what does an FMC do when she wakes up next to her hottie lover? Obviously, morning schmut. Here is some more. For those of you who are here for the spy, you've got it. During this morning session though, Sierra is thinking all sorts of dirty things, and it appears that Kingfisher can actually read those thoughts when it's directed at him, and vice versa. Which is quite convenient because no more words are needed. At one point, Sierra's mind goes, bite me. And we now know what happens if Kingfisher obeys. Loop back to what Lorith has told Sierra in the tavern when they were having one too many brevies. After their rendezvous, Sierra awakes from her euphoric state and Fisher is gone already. But she can smell coffee and freshly baked croissant. So she follows her nose and found Fisher at a round table by a window. But before she could enjoy the flaky pastry, she looks down at her hands and discovers, oh geez, even more tattoos have now migrated onto her skin, just like last time. Fisher was even interested in some of the marks this time. There were ancient symbols relating to alchemy stuff, he says. But Sierra doesn't have to keep the tattoos if she doesn't want to. She had time to decide, but she doesn't know because what do they mean? For now though, Fisher uses some magic to make them disappear off her skin temporarily. And she has a month now to decide if she wants to keep them or not for the future. It's kind of a great magic trick if you can just make tattoos disappear out of a whim. Imagine if that could happen here. At this point, it was unclear why they went to Ballad. Fisher said he was going to get something, but who knows, or maybe I missed it from the smut scene and got distracted. But it doesn't really matter. We're back. Sierra is in the forge. 3 experiments later and still nothing. Carrion bursts into the forge later in the afternoon to find Sierra throwing a tantrum and breaking glass. But Carrion has an idea. Since Sierra can make Quicksilver go from solid to liquid by just asking it, why can't she just ask it to meld with silver or other elements? Don't be ridiculous, she says. Why not? I mean, at this point, nothing else seems to have worked, so girly, give it a try. People sing to plants to encourage it to grow, so maybe talking to Quicksilver might work. Carrion, at this point, I think, is a genius. Sierra and Carrion goes to the war room where Danya's sword has splintered into the wall, remember from before. This time the Quicksilver speaks. She comes, she sees, she hears. Sierra can hear the Quicksilver talking. Can you come out of the stone? Out? Why? Because the warrior who owned you is angry with me and I want to put you back together. Owned? We are not owned. And then there's Quicksilver says, give us music and we will obey. Whoa, this Quicksilver is full of personality and seems to enjoy music. Sierra strikes up a deal with the Quicksilver to have someone sing a song for them if they are willing to leave the stone and be reforged into a sword. Then they will allow a warrior to be able to awaken the magical sword, but only if they have tasted their blood first and decide if they're worthy. I guess this Quicksilver has vampire tendencies too, because they like a little bit of a taste of blood. But damn success, finally for the alchemist. Ah, bribery. I should have thought of that, said Lorith. He had suddenly showed up and scared the shit out of Sierra and clearly was eavesdropping. While Sierra is slaving away at the forge making this new grand sword, Carrion and Lorith are out playing games by throwing knives into a tree trunk target. Obviously, Lorith is better at this. He is a bloody fae after all, and a trained warrior. And while Carrion is Carrion. The sword is magnificent. Lorith asks to hold it and take a look. He runs his finger along the edge and it's so sharp it actually cuts his fingers a little. Then the Quicksilver speaks up. It is time. Give us a song. At the same time, the sky lit up with explosions of green and pink light. The aurora, a type of blessing, possibly from the gods, or maybe it's just a coincidence. But either way, it was an impressive sight. So impressive though, it inspires Lorith to start singing and making a song up on the spot.
Just have to break into this song.
Oh, it's fucking outrageous that he can sing too. Carrion is still salty about the knife throwing competition that they had, clearly. The Quicksilver enjoys the song as well. We accept the song as tribute. The bargain is fulfilled. So not only do they accept the song that Lorith has given them, But remember how he nipped his finger on the sword and they tasted his blood? Well, at that point, they had deemed him worthy of wielding them and have now basically bonded themselves with him and the sword of magic. Which is an issue because don't forget that this sword originally belonged to the grumpy warrior Danya. It was a family heirloom after all. The Quicksilver has decided it won't let Danya even touch it, and she is mad.
I'm mad. I'm mad.
The Quicksilver in the sword has claimed Lareth to wield it, and so they can now speak to him as well. Hold me with both hands and name me, Loreth of the Broken Spears. I name you Avishith, the unsung song Redemption Dawn. Beautiful name, but ridiculously hard to pronounce. Once the sword hears the name, a blue flame ripples through the blade, and a powerful white light shoots out into the air. Apparently, this is called Angel's Breath. After all, the forging Sierras and Kingfisher spend the night together. Some corny lines are exchanged. As Kingfisher sleeps, Sierras can hear chanting again from the Quicksilver in his eye. So she actually tries to speak to it and sees if she can bargain with this Quicksilver as well. She tries to ask the Quicksilver to leave Fisher's body as it left the stone, but they won't, as Fisher is considered a weapon himself to them, and they bind themselves with him. And they are now one, and will die if they leave, including Fisher himself. We are one thing, the Quicksilver says, one weapon. Ren suddenly appears. There is a small group of Malcolm feeders that have shown up across the frozen lake again. Sierras wants to tag along, but Kingfisher's like, not sure. But she's like, I dare you to command me to stay using the bond. But if he did that, she will literally never forgive him. Of course, at this point, they both have their feels, so he's not going to do that again to her. But she has to promise to stay with Ren's side and keep safe. Fisher takes out the sword that started all of this. The sword that Sierras pulled out the Quicksilver at Madra's palace and gives it to her, which we find out is Kingfisher's father's sword, which is a lovely gesture. It's practically giving her an engagement ring, people. This is significant. Now, there wasn't as many vampires as last time, and Malcolm hadn't come this time. Like last time, though, they started beating on the ice and it started to crack while the vampires were making their way again. About 20 vampires had made its way halfway across the ice. It turns out that Fays cannot use magic until that these enemies are on their land. Some rules of war. Today, though, the current in the water was strong, and although some of the vampires fell into the freezing water, the current helped sweep them closer to their shores. Now everyone is fighting at this point. Sierra discovers that she can actually wield Solace, the magical sword, and the magic will work for her. She stays by Ren and fights along with all the warriors. Clearly that one lesson with Ren had done wonders for her skills. Kingfisher, as we suspect, is a mighty warrior, and his art of fight is like art when he fights. Even in the midst of all this chaos, Sierra is in awe of him. But you now have someone else, Loreth, and his magical sword that loves music, and his angel breath slaughters the enemies, and the warriors chant Loreth's name throughout the camp. Suddenly, though, you hear a frightful scream. Kingfisher! A shrill female voice. They quickly whip their head around to the female, and it's Lainey, surrounded by 100 vampires. So at this point, I think things are going to get a bit stressful for them. Lainey across the river is looking terrified. Fisher is about to just jump into the water and swim and get to her, but Ren holds him back. They need to think. If the enemy wanted her dead, she would be, but she clearly is part of a bigger plan. A tall, handsome male with luminous skin, cropped blonde hair comes up beside Lainey, dressed in black pants and a tailored white shirt. Clearly not ready for war, but maybe a party. Younger than Malcolm, but his power radiated off him. Why don't you come over here and say hello to an old friend, Fisher? Fuck you, Taladius. Let's call him Tal. Of course, another pronounced name that is very difficult. Turns out Malcolm is Tal's father, or really his maker. And Malcolm has also bitten Lainey, which isn't great news because now she's enthralled to Malcolm and belongs to him because they are forever bonded to their makers, mindless and devoted to their masters. Eventually, the master gets bored of them, drains them, and discards them. They then become a feeder. Obviously, Lainey has been taken to weaken Fisher, to bend him to Malcolm's will. Malcolm is waiting for him at the palace, where the two of them brokered their last deal. Interesting. What deal was that? Sounds a bit seedy, to be honest. At this point, I'm thinking that Malcolm is in love with Fisher and wants him to be his, sexy slave or something. But let's see what the deal was. Lainey was bitten 12 hours ago. She has another 56 hours, very specific, before she dies. If Fisher doesn't go and meet Malcolm soon, she will end up dead or drink from Malcolm if he permits it, and then changes her into a vampire, much like Tal, and basically be Malcolm's slave. Or worst case, if she doesn't drink from Malcolm, she will become a feeder. Neither of these two options are great. This time Malcolm doesn't just want Fisher, though, he wants the alchemist. We basically have less than 56 hours now to come up with a plan. They go back up to Callish to go to the library to find a way to hopefully save Lainey and maybe find a third solution that isn't just those two options that I mentioned earlier of her either becoming a slave or a feeder. But before they go to the library, there is something important that needs to happen. Because Sierra's fought with them side by side, they now need to perform a ritual to welcome her as one of the newly blooded warrior, which basically involves them cutting their hand and placing it in her chest and saying something like, "I give you my blood in thanks." When it comes to Fisher to do the ritual, he finally uses her full name, Sierra Spain. I assume it's meant to be significant as he never used her name here before. The shadow gate is open and they all step back to Callish. Sierra goes through first and arrive at the dining room, and Sierra sits back in her usual spot, which is to the right to Fisher. "Well, look at you, the jump-up little alchemist, sitting in pride of place at the family table. You better move before the others arrive, or you're gonna find yourself very embarrassed," says Danya. "What is with the people in her sitting position, huh? We're about to find out." Turns out that chair is reserved for the lady of the house, Fisher's wife. Danya tries to bully Sierra out of the seat, but Ren arrives and puts Danya in her place and says to Sierra, "You're perfectly right where you are." Fisher comes through next and says, "No rules have been broken, Danya. Yeah, you grumpy beach." Finally, Carrion comes through carrying a sword and a potted plant. Apparently, while the fighting was happening, he was having a nice little nap in the warm forge, and he had brought the plant back to decorate his room with, something green he wanted. I love how this character lightens up the mood, though, with all these much serious characters. If you don't love him yet, don't worry, there are more to come. Danya, though, has enough of these scattered-brained humans, even if they're pretty, she says. The only thing Carrion heard from that is that she called him pretty. "I love a girl with a sharp tongue, a bad attitude, kinda makes my eggplant hard." You see, he is the internal optimist. The best thing about them coming back to Callish, though, is that Sirius gets to see Onyx, who squeals with excitement when he sees her face. This fact has no importance to the plotline, but I thought it was adorable imaging that this cute little white fox snuggling up to Sirius after being separated from her for so long. Sirius is going back to the forge to start making relics, and is suspected she will need some in case it helps rescue Lainey. But the Quicksilver is not speaking to her yet. Then Sirius and Karen starts talking about Fisher and how he has these secrets. But upon hearing that, the Quicksilver suddenly pipes up, "Ooh, a secret? We like secrets. We'll change for you if you tell us one." Turns out not all the Quicksilver wants the same thing. The previous one wanted a song, but this one actually wants a secret. You basically have to treat the Quicksilver as another character now in the storyline with various personalities and needs. Sirius shares one at this point. She doesn't want to go back to Zavaria anymore. She will go there to get Hayden and Elroy, but she wants to come back and live in the Feyland. Ooh, yes, a good secret. Very good. You want to stay. You want to save him. You must. The Quicksilver obviously is referring to Kingfisher. "Seal us with blood, alchemist." So she does, cuts her hand and mixes it with the Quicksilver and a ring, and it was done. Sirius has made her first relic. She slips the ring on, and suddenly, though, the forge went dark and cold, and she hears a million different voices chanting at her again, and a rough more, over and over again. Then it stops when Carrion calls out her name. T. Lena appears to check up on Sirius to see if she needs healing after the battle, but before she could answer, Carrion is up to Tin Lena's face floating up a storm. But she reminds Carrion that she's happily mated and married. But that doesn't deter Carrion, of course. He says he's open to a hot husband and a wife team and happy to join them. Not everyone might want that, Carrion. But at this point, Sirius notices T. Lena has tattoos on her hands similar to the one she got after her evenings with Fisher. Sirius interrupts Carrion and be like, "Step aside, I have questions to ask about them." The tattoos are designed by her husband and herself together. It's a Fae custom to mark on their skin on their 5th wedding anniversary, apparently. A blessing that they hope will come true. These tattoos, though, are different to Sirius's ones because they were inked on by a tattooist, not after a roll in the sack. Very different. Tattoos that appear that way doesn't happen anymore. Tiana says, once upon a time this occurred when there was a true mating bond. Obviously a true mating bond similar to acotar, which is why people talk about this being a fanfic, also has mates in there and where there's bonds to happen when they accept each other. But obviously this slightly occurs differently in this book than it does in acotar. But at the same time, like I said, maybe all fairies or fays have this tradition where they have true mates like soulmates, and there is always some sort of mating bond that might occur. So unions between true mates were blessed with marks from the fates. So the tradition comes from that, is why they get tattoos now. But there's no such thing as true mates anymore, apparently. I beg to differ, lovely. Clearly, we know that this implies that Sierras and Kingfisher are true mates, soulmates of course, but Sierra remembers that she has writing tattoos on them as well. So she asks about those. They're called God binding, a blessing from the gods themselves. The most important couples in Valeria history were said to have them. Interesting again. But these are stories that Faye told each other because these lovers always, unfortunately, suffer terribly and their love story always ends in tragedy or heartbreak. Is this an omen though for Fisher and Sierra? Because if it is, I will have to mentally prepare. Sierra storms into Fisher's room to confront him about the bonding tattoos and why suddenly he decided to use her name when previously he was always happy to call her Human or Osha. Well, apparently if you refuse to refer to someone by their name, it keeps them at a distance, which is what Fisher wants to do with Sierra. And that's why he never used her name. In his mind, that's his logic. For centuries, he knew she was going to show up and be a chink in his armor, he says, making him weak against Malcolm because he would know and use her against him to control him. Sure, he refers to her as a specific butterfly, but that only lived a day. But what he didn't tell her is that this butterfly hatched once in every Fae's lifetime. So super rare. Fae will be willing to travel to this cold and risky land where they are born and shield the cocoon with their body heat, and it can take up to 12 hours for them to hatch. But when they do, they are the most beautiful things anyone can experience in a lifetime. Osha means in Fae is actually most sacred, which is what he's been calling Sierra this whole time. Secretly, she thinks that he's been calling her a useless little human, no more than a butterfly, but in his mind, when he refers to her as Osha, it is actually meant the most sacred, which obviously a lot of people are gushing over. I cringed a little bit over this, but it is cute in some ways, a little bit romantic that he has like a secret little nickname that he means for her. I mean, people I saw on TikTok that found out about this were losing their own panties over this reveal. How did you know I was coming? Fisher's mum was an oracle, written and drawn about Sierra's pictures of her before she passed away and left him a book. His mum had predicted that Sierra will appear when he was most needed her in a wave of chaos and turn his world completely upside down. Dramatic much? She also predicted that Fisher would love her with a fierceness despite himself. The pictures she draws were very accurate, except for one thing. In them, though, Sierra's had pointed ears and was meant to be a fae, but clearly she is a human. But Fisher is getting more crazy each day with the Quicksilver in his eye. The pendant isn't really keeping it at bay anymore, and he wants to reject the bond so it doesn't tie Sierra to him. All these tragic, selfless acts from the MMC, which ultimately breaks the FMC heart, always seems to occur in these books. However, he doesn't really know how to break the bond. Regardless, Fisher is totally dramatic, trying to push Sierra away and free her from him. He wants her to go back to Valeria, and after he helps his people, he's going to self-exit, apparently, before he loses his mind. But Sierra is pissed because it's Fisher giving up. Sierra is determined to find a solution to save both Lainey and Fisher now in the library. What a nerd, but you go study it up. In this land, there are witches, and they are the only ones powerful enough to break the enthrallment from vampires. But no one has seen a witch in Valeria for about hundreds of years. Plus, an ordinary one is not enough. They will need a supercharged witch, along with Lee Tina, to try to heal Lainey, and it will also take months to get rid of the poison. There are still some half-witches at Fulton's Gap. Fisher can travel there via the Shadow Gate. Finally, maybe a glimmer of hope. Carrion wants to go with Fisher. He wants to meet a witch as well. But Fisher is like, no way, because he will probably try to flirt with them and sleep with them. And who has time for that right now? Instead, Danya and Ren will go with Fisher. We vote she goes with you as well, Carrion pipes up. Don't poke the bear, man. Tina tells Fisher to see her before he leaves. Remember how Sierra was jealous thinking they were getting it on? But Lee Tina is in love with her with her hubby. It now occurred to Sirius that he must be visiting her frequently to keep the cray-cray now at bay and under control, hopefully. Hours later in the library, no results. But Ren appears looking super annoyed. Apparently they did find some witches, but Daniel said something offensive, and Fisher now has to take her back to Inran and then smooth things over with the witch, because there was one apparently that was strong enough to help them, but she was foul-mouthed creature and not a big fan of the Fays. Who is, it seems like. But Fisher is also foul-mouthed, so maybe that charm will work on her. 3 hours later, Fisher returns with the witch named Izzy Bell. I'll call her Izzy. Izzy didn't look impressed with his mob. This is it? You're planning to take on Malcolm and kidnap his newest thrall with just 3 Fae males and 2 humans? Fisher initially was like, no way are the humans coming, but listen, you can't tell Sierras what to do. And even Carrion was ready to go. Really? You, Carrion? Ready for battle? Not a nap? Sure, why not? I'm too pretty to die old anyway, he says. Sierras and Fisher spend one more night together before they go off to war with Malcolm. Fisher takes Sierras to the apartment Ballad. He has set up this living room with candles, creating a bit of a vibe, a romantic vibe if you have it. Here, there is more schmutz to be enjoyed for those of you who like these spicy things in life. They are pretty much doing the mating bond in this chapter. Sierras can feel the energy threading through her, and more ink now appear on Sierras' arm. By the end of this, Sierras is basically going to be a walking tattoo with a side of skin. Tattoo also have now appeared on Fisher's body, including a majestic bird, flashing metallic blue and green, fanned out around either side of his neck. Over the course of the night, this horny couple do it 5 more times. I mean, you're only going to war tomorrow. Maybe you want to conserve some energy? No? Okay, you do you, boo. So why did Fisher get tattoos this time? It turns out when one mate gets the tattoo first, the other party accepts the bond, then sometimes marks will show up on their body too, which means Fisher has now accepted the mating bond. But Sierras is shocked. She's human and he lives a lot longer than her. But he says, I'll be grateful for every second that I can say that I belong to you, Sirius Vane. 80 years or 18 hours, it doesn't matter to me. It'll still be the highest honor of my life. Oh, swoon, you romantic guy. Since when did you turn into such a romantic sap? But Sierras hasn't yet decided if she's accepting the bond or not. Ladies' choices here. Remember how last time they were at Ballad, Fisher said he came here for something, but we never knew what it was? Well, apparently he came here for hope.
That sounds super cringe.
When Sierras wakes up the next day, Fisher was gone and has left a note. It seems Fisher now has gone off to get Lainey all by himself and open up the shadow gate for her to go through after he rescues her. He was also going to send her a shadow gate back to Callie to wait there with the others in the library. It was also a goodbye note, basically. He said to tell Loreth to live his life and not go with him, tell Ren he's sorry, and he releases Sierras from the oath they made for her to find her family and live a peaceful life in one of the other realms. Sierras is sad and pissed at the same time. And what is even more devastating is that he left his sword because he didn't want Malcolm to have it if he was to be killed. Once Sierras goes back to Callie, she tells everyone, of course, there's no way they're not going to go after Fisher. But how? There is no Quicksilver around for them to transport to where Malcolm is. But good old Carrion has a brilliant idea. When Lainey comes back through the shadow gate that Fisher opens up, it will stay open for a very small window of time for them to actually go through and jump through and get to Fisher. I'm coming with you though, through that portal, Carrion said. But first, I want one of those fancy swords. So we're now back in the forge, and Sierras and Carrion are both there. And you hear Sierras go, have you heard about the first at the circus? It was intense. Get it? Intense. Sierras says, what the fuck is this lady telling bad jokes that aren't funny? Well, it turns out the Quicksilver she is negotiating with to create a magical sword for Carrion will only bond with it if it has a joke in return. Like Carrion, the Quicksilver was not satisfied with that joke. Well, then let Carrion try. He is the light entertainment here after all. So Carrion gives it a go. A husband turns to his wife one day and says, you know, I bet you can't think of something to tell me that will make me both happy and sad at the same time. The wife doesn't need to think about it. She has an answer ready to go. She turns to her husband and says, honey, your eggplant is way bigger than your brother. Not bad, right? This one did make me smile. Clearly, the Quicksilver also enjoys a dirty joke because the deal is made. The Quicksilver is binded with the sword, and of course they want them to be named. And as Carrion, as the new wielder, he names the sword a magical name, Simon. Names the damn sword Simon, which I love because it's easier to pronounce. I wouldn't expect anything more or anything less from Carrion. This is why I grew to adore this character and the humor he injects, which I think is much needed in this fantasy. That always seems to be a little bit tragic, whereas he adds a little bit of light and hopefulness. The sword likes the name as well, and it wants to be called Simon because Carrion now can hear it talk to him. Isabel is setting up things to treat Lainey once she comes through the Shadow Gate. Suddenly, a hole does open up in the air, but it's above their head. Lainey falls from the ceiling. This Shadow Gate was up above their head, much trickier to get through than if it was upright, if you ask me. Lainey is alive, and before Sierra disappears through the hole, she calls to her and she wanted her to tell her something. Sierra, wait, the water, Lainey says. But too late to ask for clarification, she has already stepped through the gate and is falling. Sierra hits the water hard. She has sunk into a lake and all she could feel was pain all down her sides. Luckily, Loreth was there to pull her out of the water, and then he goes back in to drag out Carrion, who is in much need of CPR at this point. Carrion Swift, if you don't wake up right now, I'm going to tell all of your a-hole friends back in the third that you were a shippy lay. That got him up, vomiting out lungfuls of water, and he mutters out, "You wouldn't fucking dare." So he's okay. Unfortunately, Ren didn't make it through the Shadow Gate before it closed. So it's the three of them, Loreth, Sierra, and Carrion there on the rescue mission to get Fisher back. Odds don't look great, but I tell ya, it is suspenseful in this part of the book. Loreth passes some Widow's Bane to Sierra and Carrion, which acts as a very powerful pain reliever, which is needed as they are both about to climb up some jagged cliffs. Luckily, back at the third, both Sierra and Carrion had a lot of experience climbing over Madra's wall. So they're pretty good at this point. Once Sierra's placed her hand on the cliff, she starts hearing the chant again though. Anaroth more, Anaroth more, Anaroth more. They get up and over the cliff and enter into this huge amphitheater. There are thousands of people in the stands roaring at them. Anaroth more, Anaroth more, Anaroth more. It turns out that the chant means release us. Finally, you get to find out what all the chanting is about. Across the other side, Sierra sees a platform as there are people sitting atop it. At the base of the platform though, Fisher was there and luckily alive. Karen, Madra's guard, remember from earlier on that tried to slay Sierras. Madra's guard was there, standing inches from Loreth. You will think that this man didn't make it, and he shouldn't have, but he looked unnatural, like he was brought back to life, as his eyes were now orbs of metal, pure quicksilver were in them. He had pressed a dagger against Loreth's throat. What was Heron doing here though, in the Fey realm? But no time to discuss, because hundreds of feeders are climbing up the cliff as well to get to them. But Heron could control them. Again, why would Heron have these powers? Heron creates a vortex and forces the three to step through it so they could go and enjoy the games. Fisher is the first person Sierra sees on his knees, covered in blood, and sitting on the throne. So obviously the vortex has taken them across the stadium to the throne. So sitting there on the throne is Malcolm, and to the right of him sits Balikon, Fisher's stepfather, and then to the left is Madra. What is happening here? All three villains are all together. Their magic unfortunately cannot be used here. Balkan warns them not to even bother. Madra pipes up. You should have at least let them try, brother. What? Maldra, a human, is a sister of Balcone, who is a fae, and then there's this vampire? Are they all related in some ways? Also, aren't they pissed with Madra for closing the Quicksilver? Well, apparently they were annoyed a little bit, but they considered a tiff. For creatures that have lived for thousands of years, who cares? So it seems all is forgiven between the three of them. All these years, Belgan had known it was Madra that had closed the Quicksilver portal, but had framed Fisher's dad to ruin their family name and probably to marry his mother and get all her fortunes. Pure evil fae right here. And Belgan has never been at war with Malcolm. He's been feeding his brother's armies with fae he doesn't really care about. Hadn't you better give your plaything a break, Malcolm? Madra purrs at him. Be a shame if you died before you could play your little game. Clearly this is all a bit of an entertainment for them, but what game torture are they about to make Fisher do? The last time these three villains were together, they saw the fall of Galithrian, and poor Fisher had to witness it all. Bellico implies though it was Fisher who just destroyed Galithrian and killed all the people, and this whole time he was bounded by an oath that stopped him from talking about it, as we sort of knew earlier on. He turns to Malcolm and asks if they should break the oath and let Fisher tell them what he did. Malcolm gestures to the crowd. I think we should ask them. After all, they're the ones he killed. Sirius looks into the crowd and notices that their skin was all burnt, mouths fixed in terrible screams, and their eyes were either missing or melted to gelatine and running out of their sockets and trapped in their misery. An amazing, horrific sight to see. Bellacone claps his hands and says, You're right, we should ask them. What say you, Fays of Gallithrion? Should I remove the dog's gag? The crowd roars with noise and Bellacone releases Fisher from his oath finally. Fisher finally gets to tell the story of what happened here. During the war, Malcolm had sent thousands of his feeders there, and Fisher couldn't move his armies fast enough through the Shadow Gates to defend them. So Wren and a group of his captains showed up to save as many as they could from the land. A total of 7 warriors against 20,000 feeders. The Fays were all out as they were celebrating at a festival that day. The feeders had already started to sweep through the streets, causing much chaos. Fisher went to find Malcolm to kill him, but he didn't find Malcolm. Instead, it was Bellacone, who unalived his mother, it turned out, after she gave birth to Lainey. He slit her throat. Malcolm arrived shortly after, and Fisher knew of their alliance and at that point, but clearly could never talk about it because of the oath. He didn't know about Maldra though until now. He made a bargain with Bellacone. A flip of a coin gamble. The coin was only used in Gallithrion. If the coin hit the ground and landed leaf up, Malcolm would call off his hordes and leave. If the coin landed fish side up, he would take the city and destroy it, and Fisher would have to leave and meet Malcolm on a battlefield at a later date. Until the coin had landed and the outcome of the toss determined, Fisher was not allowed to harm Bellacone or Malcolm. Fisher was desperate to save these people, so he made the blood oath. Bellacone threw the coin. Malcolm unfortunately caught it. The coin actually never hit the ground, so the outcome was never determined. It means the bet is still on, and Fisher could never harm them. Very scoundrelous behavior, and ever so cunning. Malcolm hordes feasted on the crowd. By this stage, most of the Gallithrian people were either turned or dead. So Fisher trapped everyone inside the city and torched it, which included the 2,000 Fays and lesser Fays. But if they kept alive, they probably would have joined Malcolm's army anyway. So he made a choice. Malcolm obviously was not impressed with this move that Fisher made. So in order to torture him further, he created a labyrinth, or aka a maze, if you didn't know what that word meant, and hit the coin at the center of this maze and filled the stands with the burning bodies that Fisher basically trapped and kept their souls there taunting Fisher while he desperately looked for the coin to make it fall to the ground and end this bond. Although too late to save the innocent, but at least it will end the deal and free the souls and their sufferings, and then he could hurt Bellacone and Malcolm. In 55 years, Fisher made it to the center of the maze, but they spent another 8 years trying to find the coin. Then Tull, who was checking in on Fisher, saw that a big hole appeared at the center one day. The Quicksilver had been awoken, and Fisher escaped through it. I'd been dying to know. After 110 years in that maze, what made you finally leave? Malcolm asked. You bored him to forking tears, and he couldn't take it anymore, Carrion replied. Carrion has lost his marbles, now taunting a vampire. Are you trying to get yourself killed, buddy? I don't know. Malcolm instantly pounced and wrapped his hand around Carrion's throat. Carrion has a smart mouth and isn't afraid to use it. He continues to taunt Malcolm. This is a man who is a survivalist, always with a plan, so I'm not sure at this point what he's up to. Fisher, though, interrupts and says, do you really want to know why I left? It's because I heard my father's sword calling, knowing Malcolm will be intrigued by this, and also to distract him from Carrion. In a flash, Fisher turns into smoke and is ready to attack. He grabs Sirius and his sword, and that she had carried it through the gate, and drove the sword up into Bellacone's stomach. Madra unleashes a disgusting scream, and it becomes chaos. Lorith nicks Malcolm in the neck, but Fisher already yelling for everyone to run, and they head towards the labyrinth maze. There's definitely a lot of chaos and action here, but ultimately they are in the maze heading towards the center to end this once and for all by finding the coin. Luckily, Fisher knows the maze pretty well because it's been there for a really long time. But the fortunate part is the maze has a lot of things that can kill you, like a monster, like a gigantic spider. 3 times the height of a full-grown man, with more legs than you can count. Its mixed section was a fleshy bulb in red and black, like a male torso with a beer belly, and wispy, greasy black hair like a comb over a balding head. Super attractive. No eyes or nose, but a round mouth with jagged teeth. Its name was Morthkill, a demon. The problem with this maze is that it changes courses all the time, but the center has Quicksilver, which means our local alchemists can detect it and therefore find the center fast. They escape the disgusting demon and follow Sierra's instructions towards the center. As she gets closer, the chant of the Quicksilver grows louder, letting her know how close she is. Sierra rounds the corner and slips on a slick floor with Carrion right behind her and lands, boom, on her. They had landed in the room of 1,000,000 coins. This is where Fisher was trapped for years. No wonder the man had gone a little bit loopy. Hello, my love. Bloody Malcolm has appeared. Then Madra appears after a costume change. Instead of a dress, she's now in a golden armor and the bellicone, clearly okay. The hole in his stomach already gone. To kill one, you have to kill all of them. Take the challenge, Fisher and co. Go for it. He is with Simon, and he's ready to annoy the crap out of them. For what reason? Who knows? Fisher and Sirius are sending messages back and forth in their mind, and even they are confused by Carrion's behavior. While Carrion is insulting Malcolm and Bellicone, Fisher feeds Sirius some important information. The coin is silver. A vampire would never be able to stand on that much silver, which means that the coins that they're standing on are not silver, and only this one piece, the actual coin, will be made out of silver. And so she needs to be able to trace it with Quicksilver in it. Because this one silver coin has not only Quicksilver and silver in it, Sierra's should be able to track it down with her alchemist power. Whilst Sierra's is darting around trying to sense the Quicksilver, Malcolm is now threatening to rip Carrion's throat out. Clearly his insults have hit a spot with Malcolm. Carrion lowers his sword and taunts Malcolm some more. Go ahead, leech. Bite me and see where it gets you. And Malcolm takes it on. He drinks, draining Carrion. But suddenly Malcolm rocks back and is frowning. Carrion, on the other hand, is grinning like an idiot. My name is Carrion Swift, but there was a time I was known as Carrion Dienhoutus, firstborn son to Rithik and Amelia. What is this guy? Royalty? Heir to the throne that had disappeared years ago, remember, into the human realms. You tricked me into drinking your blood, Malcolm choked. But no more time for explanations at this point. Sierra is off looking for the coin, but Malcolm is clearly disarmed by Carrion's blood. Black veins are starting to pulse through his skin. It suddenly was quiet. The dead souls in the crowd were also silent, making it easier for now to hear the coin and the Quicksilver. The Quicksilver wants a bargain, but Sierra is desperate. She didn't want any more bargains, but she had to save her mate, she says. She said it out loud. Then the Quicksilver asked for a small favor then. She says yes, without asking any more questions. Have we not learned from earlier to read the fine prints before you make a deal? Remember the monster from earlier? Well, they did kill it and left it in the lair, but it turned out the coin was actually in the monster. It's in his esophagus, to be accurate. She has to put her hands in its mouth, past the razor teeth, and down its throat to get it out. Even though she has to do something so disgusting, Sirius had time to notice her arms are now again covered with tattoos and ruins, because remember, she called Fisher her mate, which kind of now means she has accepted the mating bond on her side. But back to what is important at this point, getting the coin and breaking the oath. You better give me that coin, girl. Again, Malcolm appears at the most optimal time. Carrion's blood has clearly weakened Malcolm, but yet still here he is being totally annoying and still has much of his powers because he throws Sirius against the wall with a flick of his wrist. Fisher is speaking to her in her mind to stay conscious, stay alive. Sirius pulls a dagger from her thighs and plunges it into Malcolm's throat. He wasn't dead, but he was raging now, and he slams his fist into her stomach and drove upwards. Fisher is running towards her, but for very far away. He is coming, but doesn't look like he'll get there in time. But just when you think all is over, Sierra mutters up some strength, holds up the little coin, and drops it to the ground. As it landed, the ground shook. Stupid bitch, what have you done? Malcolm whispered. A gust of wind slams into the maze. The loud chanting starts again. As the wind whips past the soul, they turn into ash. Finally freed, Malcolm is looking at the stand in dismay. As he turns around, Sierra is on her feet with flawless in her hand, and she lops off his head. Finally, Malcolm is gone. Fisher is there. Unfortunately, Madra disappeared somewhere in the Quicksilver. Lorith is dealing with Bellicone. It doesn't look good though for our girlie as she is dying. Tal is offering help, which means what? Turning her into a vampire? Fisher wants to give her part of his soul, but unfortunately he doesn't have enough anymore to give to her. Sierras will not take his soul anyway. Here the option then, Sierras will have to be turned maybe into a vampire. The world around seems to be ending. I suspect since this world was tied to Malcolm, and since it's gone, it's crumbling down, and they need to get out of this maze. Sierras is in Fisher's arms, hearing commotion all around her, but can't move. Her pulse starts to quicken because she's starting to turn. You stand before a door. Your hand is poised to knock. Are you ready to walk through it? Will you leave this place and see what lies beyond in the next? Has death now finally come and whispering to her? But Sierra doesn't want to go yet. She wanted to stay with Fisher, even if it means more suffering and hardship. As you wish, the voice says. Then we call our favor, Sierra's Fane. We require an audience with you, Sierra's Fane. So it turns out the voices that she's hearing is not death. It is the Quicksilver asking for the favor, the deal that they made with her earlier on. Sierra's was ripped from Fisher's arm by an invisible rope through the air, across the maze and into a pool of Quicksilver. It's dead. Don't be ridiculous. Of course it's not dead. Two young and playful female voices were talking about Sierras. Sierras opens her eyes and gets up. There is no pain and she's lying in a lovely field. Two identical ladies about 18 to 19-year-old dressed in dark grey dresses are staring at her with black hair and royal blue eyes with silver threads through them. The first young lady who spoke asked Sierras explain adult time to her. She wants to know what it's like with Kingfisher in the boudoir. Okay, nosy one. We want to try him out for ourselves. But father forbade it, the other lady said. Turns out these two are Belle and Mythian. Remember from way earlier where we talked about the gods? These are the two goddesses that was once one goddess but got split into two by lightning, the two sun goddesses. These two pull Sierras over to meet their father near a big oak tree in the distance. Who's their father? Well, none other than the god of chaos, Zareth. You are Sierras, mate to my champion. Zareth has been watching the world and has been waiting for an alchemist to reset the balance of the world and clear the way for others to come. Why? What's coming though? He turns to the oak tree. A river of Quicksilver surrounds it. Here we stand at the edge of the universe. The roots you see growing down into the earth, into the Quicksilver, are the anchors of fate. It's gone very godly here. I'm going to be honest, all this talk is a bit confusing for me at this point. A lot of cryptic jibber jabber that is hard to follow, but I guess that's how gods talk. There are leaves in the Quicksilver which represents realms, and if Zareth wants, he can remove a whole entire realm with a sweep of his hand and sink the leaf, which he does, wiping out billions with no care in the world. Zareth says he was intrigued by her, by Sierras and Kingfisher. Their bond was powerful and he attempted to actually sway the fates. Sierras was meant to be born Fae. Fisher's mum was right about all that, but Zareth intervened and actually separated them because their power bond worried him because it was so powerful. But regardless of his meddling, they did find each other and he could not stop fate. This is the bit that is very cryptic. The world is balanced with both good and evil. The power of their bond is so powerful, it will bring about both of this at a very elevated level, which means what a lot of good will happen, but equally bad will also occur, potentially so bad that it might end the entire universe, but not sure, yet to be seen, which is why I guess there's going to be more books. Sierras thinks this is a lot to take in, as do I. I think this bit of the book is quite confusing. Even reading it over a few times, I'm still not quite sure what it's saying and what the conclusion is, but maybe that's the whole point, to leave us with some questions and a bit of doubt. And since there is not many more pages left of this book, I doubt we'll get answers right here. Zareth explains the god bonds runes on her skin. The script writing protect her and Fisher from the attention of the other gods, his brothers and sisters, the other God League people. These other gods would rather kill Fisher and roll the dice on what's next to come to the universe, even if it meant to clear the universe and start all over again. Zareth, though, doesn't want that to happen because it would break his daughter's hearts if this universe was destroyed. For them, he will take the chance on Sierras and Kingfisher and roll the dice. If Sierras really agrees to be Fisher's mate, she will be severed from the tapestry on the universe, and then that means Zareth could no longer interfere and keep an eye on her. Her fate will be all in her hands. Considering none of us know our fate has been manipulated by the gods, what does it matter? Sierras initially is worried to be severed, but Zareth says if she doesn't accept the bond and get severed from Fisher, then Fisher won't survive. Clearly he wants her to go back and save this universe with Fisher. So take the gamble. Sierra finally has learned her lesson and asks about the fine print of her decision. What does being severed mean? It means she is transferred into something that has never been seen before the universe. So what does it mean to be severed? It seems like she's going to become something that the universe has never seen. Because once she becomes something that the universe has never seen, none of the gods, including Zareth, can now see her walking amongst the world. See what I mean? Cryptic. But regardless, she agrees to these terms. Sierra wakes up in a bed and immediately purges. Tal walks into the room. They call it the Great Purge, he says. Sierra immediately recognizes him and starts looking for a weapon, and then notices she's wearing a skimpy pajamas and immediately wants to start looking for something to cover her body from being half naked. Tal laughs but tries not to look as he explains that although she's turned, she should be able to eat normal food soon. Sierra wasn't sure what he meant by turn. She's not vampire, she tells him. He seems to agree. What do you mean he agrees and that she's not like him? She walks over to the mirror and sees exactly what he means at this point in time. She's still Sierra's, same dark hair, blue eyes, but she now has pointed ears and very long vampire teeth. Turns out, as the gods say, she will be something the world has never seen, which is half vampire and half fae, the first of her kind. But they're not sure what traits she has of each of the different species. I guess, but she's definitely no longer human here. Tal has put a memory block on her so she doesn't get overwhelmed with what has happened while she was turning, but she demands that it be removed so she remembers what happens. Getting pulled into the Quicksilver, talking to Zareth, then remembering Fisher pulls her out and brings her back to this unknown location at this point. She has flashes of Carrion and Fisher fighting around her, Loriev singing to her, 3 days of transitioning to this new creature, and she remembers biting Tal's neck at some point, which is normal during the change. And at some point during the change, she begs Tal to let her go and end it all. And Tal says, I get it, I felt the same way. Once Tal was changed himself, he did try to end himself since he didn't get the choice to become vampire. But Malcolm had forbidden it and he had to obey. But now that Malcolm is gone, he was free to choose what he wanted to do with his life. Carrion now drops by and he also is different. He has pointed ears and vampire teeth as well, and a little bit taller. Sierra punches him in the arm for lying to her and not telling her that he was fae royalty. To be honest, that is probably not something you go around telling people and humans, right? Especially since they don't really believe in faes, or if they did, they didn't really think highly of them. It turns out Fisher's dad took Carrion to Zavarian when he was little to save him about Bellicone. He glamoured his ears and canines to make him come across as a human. Fisher's dad actually was the one that left him the book about the Fae so he can learn about his heritage. Carrion was saved by a woman named Orlena, who was a slave at Madra's palace. She had pulled him out of the Quicksilver and escaped to the Third and raised him like her own son. Then the gates were closed, so that's why he was stuck as Zavarian for about 1,000 years as well. Everything is so coincidental here. Fisher's father had been the one to save the true heir to the throne of Valeria. 1,000 years later, Fisher, the son, is the one who actually brings him back to his land. Other things to update here are that Lena was alive, Wen was looking after her as she sort of was in a coma at this moment. But the healers are hopeful that she will wake up. Madra, we know, has fled, and unfortunately so did Bellicone. The reason that Malcolm got sick from drinking Carrion is that his father's blood was used to create the blood curse that allowed Malcolm to become a vampire. Therefore, they cannot drink from a living member of the bloodline that actually created them, and they also cannot enthrall them. In most cases, this would have killed the vampire, but since Malcolm was so old and powerful, it didn't, but it did hinder him. Malcolm was also the one who had Bellicone kills Carrion's parents. Finally, Fisher arrives and kisses her on the forehead, which is a super cute gesture, I think. Carrion is like, are you guys gonna now start addressing each other? Because I can leave. Or maybe not, he suggests. Fisher is like, no, get out, leave now. He wants to be alone with his mate. Again, cute, I think. Sierra notices there is less Quicksilver in Fisher's eye. Tana Lena found a way to actually dampen the Quicksilver effect. The witch Izzy, though, found a way to tease it out of him bit by bit, and it should eventually get it all out. Everything is wrapped up in a perfect bow right here. Well, sort of. They still need to go deal with Bellicone and Madra. Also, one other thing, they are now in the land of vampires, it seems. The other side of the frozen damn lake, remember? Because it turns out the person who kills the king of vampires is now going to become their new leader, which is Sierras. And in 2 days' time, she will become the new Queen of Zenzroth. So what a ride. So for now, things are happy, but clearly it's very open-ended for the next book. The story will continue. My thoughts are, I love Carrion. Sierras is a really strong FMC. Fisher grows on you, becoming much sweeter and less rude as we go on in the book, as you can see, and shows really cute affections to his mate once he's accepted the bond. And I'm not too mad at his dirty mouth as long as he's not rude. I wish there was more personality from Ren and Lorith, but I think they will get more later in the new books. Because at this moment in the first book, they're a little bit beige. Unlike other romanticities like acotar, unfortunately the side characters didn't play a huge role and didn't have too much character traits like they did in acotar, where you fell in love not only with the main characters maybe, but also with their inner circles. So I'm hoping that there is more of a ramp up and maybe a few more characters injected into the book. However, as this is the first book, a lot of it is about world building and about the 2 main characters. Part of it was quite confusing, like the talks from the gods at the start and then all the jibber jabber from the gods at the end. Whereas I wish more important information was mentioned throughout the book, so I didn't have to recall so much information from ages ago, like I was studying for exam. But overall, I think an enjoyable read, and it's a good book to start off with, and I think it will get better. I hope you have enjoyed this detailed recap. It is long, but so is the book. And let's see what the future brings for Sierras and Fisher in the next book. So thank you so much, my little munchkins, for staying on with me and watching this video. I will hope to see you on the next one. But for now, bye.